Inside Out is definitely one of Disney's best movies ever made. And because it's so good, did you know that there are several references to the movie in various cartoons, series, and even other animated films? What? The most recent reference happened in the creation of a promotional image for another film also released in 2024, just like Inside Out 2. Garfield is indeed a great film, even though Inside Out is better. To promote the movie, Sony created a poster almost identical to the one Pixar used to promote Inside Out just a few weeks earlier. In the original poster, we see all the emotions, new and old, squeezed together with joy in the middle. And Garfield's version is exactly the same, but with Garfield centered and several other characters from the film around him, all somewhat squeezed too. Even the slogans on the poster were the same. I really enjoyed this reference, very creative. Check out now all 14 references to Inside Out and other movies that you had no idea about. One of the most speculated theories involving Inside Out is that Riley and Mei Lee from Turning Red exist within the same universe, which would be really cool since both characters are practically the same age, and as we see in Inside Out 2, both are going through puberty. Well, if that's true, Pixar hasn't confirmed it yet, but one thing is certain. Some things that exist in Riley's environment also exist where Mei Lee lives. And proof of this is that in one of the scenes in Turning Red, we find the same brand of chewing gum that exists in Inside Out, the famous Triple Dent. The gum simply has the catchiest jingle in commercial history.
Triple Dent gum will make you smile.
Anyone who has watched Inside Out knows that one of the most memorable scenes is when Riley introduces herself to her new class and ends up crying in the process. And what if I told you that two of Riley's classmates are famous in another Pixar movie? Would you believe it? Well, in the Toy Story That Time Forgot Christmas special, released in 2014, a year before Inside Out, we see two toy soldiers in the Battlesars toy box. The detail is that these two toy soldiers are in the same class as Riley in San Francisco, as we can see in the scene where Riley cries. But you might be wondering, how did this reference happen before Inside Out was even released? This happened because Pixar loves to reuse their background characters, and they did this with the two toy soldiers by putting them in Riley's class and her emotional journey. And it's not just once that we see references to Inside Out in Toy Story. In the fourth movie of Disney's biggest franchise, we also see a subtle appearance of one of the most interesting items from Inside Out. When Woody is in the antique shop, in a certain scene, we see Bing Bong's wagon on one of the shelves. It's in the corner and almost impossible to see unless you pause at the right moment. This is the same wagon that Joy uses to get out of the pit of forgotten memories, where we see our dear Bing Bong disappear forever. At least for now. And since we're remembering this beloved character from Inside Out, if you miss him as much as we do, comment below, #BingBong.
Take her to the moon for me.
The Simpsons is probably the longest running cartoon that still airs and makes fun of every other movie and cartoon it can. And of course, Inside Out was not going to be left out of their list of spoofs. This happened in episode 7 of season 27, when Homer is playing poker and gets a really good hand. We then enter his mind and see a bizarre version of the Inside Out emotions, each represented by a character from the show. My favorite was seeing Milhouse's fear. It was a perfect match. The cool thing is that behind Homer's emotions, we can see the islands of donuts, hamburgers, and bowling. Totally fitting for Homer. But that wasn't the only reference to the Pixar film in the Yellow Family show. In another episode, where Homer accidentally takes the same escalator as Trump, he starts looking at Trump's hair and imagining what's underneath. At that moment, we see Bart and Lisa's dad's mind kind of floating above Trump's bald spot, and a reddish character suddenly appears and starts shooting flames from his head. This is a clear reference to the Pixar movie, but it seems to be a mix of fear and anger, as it does the same thing and is also red, but it wears fierce clothes like a bow tie. Speaking of movie posters inspired by Inside Out, we also see that long before Garfield, the Angry Birds movie did something very similar. Sony, once again, created a poster where we could see a pig's head with several characters from the movie inside it. Just like the Inside Out posters that had Riley's head with the emotions inside it. And as if that wasn't enough, Angry Birds even used the movie's title, Inside Out, and made a kind of parody, writing Inside Snout to prove it really was a direct reference. Just like The Simpsons, Family Guy is a show with no limits when it comes to mocking other shows. In one of the episodes, a random joke shows the mind of an alternate version of Riley, where all the emotions are represented by each member of the Griffin family. But instead of fear, Peter is the poop emotion. This was definitely the most absurd reference you'll see on this list. And it's not the only one, as you'll see shortly.
I'm poo.
As you probably know, Disney loves to make references to characters from its other movies. So Riley and her classmates were chosen to be visiting the aquarium in the movie right when Dory appears on the scene. Notice that in the background is Riley, and closer to the front is one of her classmates from Inside Out, who also appears in Toy Story. It's all connected, don't you think? As we mentioned before, everyone remembers that super annoying triple dent gum commercial that no one likes, but the folks managing Riley's memory love to send it to her playback. And what if I told you that this same brand of gum also appears in Cars 3? Would you believe it? That's right, in a very subtle way, we see that one of the competitors in the races Lightning McQueen participates in, specifically competitor number 31, is sponsored by the same gum brand, as we can see on the car's paint job. This becomes clear when we see one of the support team cars with the gum brand logo on its side next to the number 31, as we mentioned. Seriously, this gum brand manages to be annoying in more than one movie. But one thing that is definitely not annoying are the videos on our channel, so here's a tip. Subscribe to the channel right now if you haven't already.
Congratulations!
Speaking of triple dent, it also appears in another more recent Pixar movie where we see the famous gum brand again. In Onward, released in 2020, when Ian enters a convenience store and there's a small gang of pixies vandalizing the place, we can notice that one of the items on the shelf they're messing with is a small pack of triple dent gum, showing that this gum brand seems to have a catchy jingle in different dimensions. If Anger found out about this, it would definitely be hilarious. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, many Disney fans would love to see Riley and Mei Lee appear in the same movie. But what if I told you that this has already happened? Well, it hasn't been officially confirmed by Disney, but when Mei Lee, the protagonist of Turning Red, transforms into a giant red panda and runs through the school, she passes by two people, a boy and a girl. She runs so fast that they end up falling to the ground, and at that moment, we can see the girl's face. We then realize she looks exactly like Riley. The question is, what would the protagonist of Inside Out be doing in Toronto, where Mei Lee's story takes place? Maybe one day Disney will give us more answers. Speaking of shows that love to make fun of other shows and series, Robot Chicken is probably the most outrageous of them all. In one of its episodes, the show simulates Riley and her emotions having a sleepover with two friends. This is a coincidence, as in Inside Out 2, Riley has exactly two close friends. The fact is, in this episode, the girl's mind has 5 emotions just like in the movie. But in this scene, we also meet the 5 emotions of fear, and the funny thing is, even though they are different colors, they all look like fear. Kind of like Gary's head that we see in the post-credits scene of Inside Out.
That's crazy.
But the show that satirizes all movies and animations in a heavy-handed way had an even weirder reference to Inside Out. In this reference, we see Riley's head as an adult, and there are more emotions that now coexist with the original 5. They might be passion in a more adult way, hunger, and intolerance. So the show kind of predicted that we would have new emotions, but they didn't get any of them right. One thing I know for sure is that Inside Out 2 is definitely a great animated movie. And since we know that you love cartoons and animated movies, we're leaving these 2 videos for you now on the screen. Pick one and watch it. You're